jẹ ẹ̀wọ̀n ọmọ onílé tó ń sùn tàbí ẹ̀rù àsìkò ti tó a ò fẹ́ mọ́ ẹjẹ́ lọ́rọ̀ kan lẹ́nu káṣọ ń gbogbo papọ̀ ká má ṣe ra wa lọ́mọ ìyá Haúsá. Ìṣọ̀kan Yorùbá òmìnira Yorùbá ọwọ́ èmi àti ẹ̀ṣà ló wà. Ìṣọ̀kan Yorùbá òmìnira Yorùbá ló jẹ́ wá lógún àsìkò ti tó. Ìṣọ̀kan Yorùbá òmìnira Yorùbá ló jẹ́ wá lógún àsìkò ti tó. Àìpọ̀ ọmọ ejò ló ń jẹ ejò níyà ló ń fi ikú pa wọ́n òbí o. Tọ́ka bá ṣe iwájú o, tèrè tẹ̀lé ti paramọ́lẹ̀ tó tún bá tẹ̀lé. Ọlọ́dẹ náà dá tá a dojú kọ wọ́n, ẹ̀tẹ́ ló máa bá bọ̀. Tọmọ Ọ̀yọ́ bá tẹ̀ lọ́mọ Ògùn, tọmọ Oǹdó bá tẹ̀ lọ́mọ Èkìtì, tọmọ Kogi àtọmọ Kwara tán bá fún ṣọ̀kan ohun ló máa dẹ̀rọ̀. Gbogbo ẹgbẹ́ ta ní pátá tó jẹ́gbẹ́ Yorùbá ti bá ní máa dàgọ́ ilé aṣù. Ilé àmọ́ tó dàpọ̀ gan tó jọ̀bọ̀ Odùduwà torí oríṣiríṣi ẹgbẹ́ ó wà. Òmìnira ló yẹ wá kó dẹ̀ máa tẹ̀ wá lọ́wọ́ tá bá ṣe ra wa lóṣooṣù ọwọ́. Ìṣọ̀kan Yorùbá òmìnira Yorùbá o ló jẹ́ wá lógún òwe. Ìṣọ̀kan Yorùbá òmìnira Yorùbá o ló jẹ́ wá lógún àsìkò. Ṣàníjì lórúkọ tèmi ṣòkòtò Yorùbá òmìnira Yorùbá ló jẹ́ wá lógún àsìkò tí tó.
Comment and share.
Ladies and gentlemen, the national anthem of the newly formed Oduduwa Nation.
Káàbọ̀ sà sí dáadáa lẹ́dẹ́ gbogbo ará òkè ọ̀hún kọ́.
Àbúrò dáadáa ni o, ẹ̀yin náà ń kọ́ tí mo bá yín dáadáa.
Sẹ́ẹ̀rì ẹ̀gbọ́n ó tiẹ̀ dá. Eléyìí tẹ́ ẹ wá yìí tẹ́ ẹ bá ti ń lọ a ó jọ mọ́ lọ padà ni o. Ẹ wò ó ká mọ́ purọ́ ìlú yìí ò dáa gbogbo ẹ̀ sì ti sú mi pátápátá.
Àbúrò kò rọrùn bó ṣe wí yẹn o, àti wípé orí bẹ́kọ́ ni ògùn orí fífọ́, sísá lọ́kọ́ ni ọ̀nà àbáyọ bí kì í ṣe wípé kí àwọn ọ̀dọ́ Yorùbá ká parapọ̀ sọ̀mọ̀dọ̀ kan láti gba ara wa kúrò lóko ẹrú.
Eba orí bíbẹ́ kọ́ lóògùn orí fífọ́ mu gbà la fi ṣàgbékalẹ̀ Yorùbá Nation Youth website fún gbogbo ọ̀dọ́ Yorùbá ká darapọ̀ ṣọ̀kan lágbàáyé. Ní báyìí ìforúkọsílẹ̀ ti ń lọ lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ a sì ti ń wá àwọn aṣojú jákèjádò àgbáyé èyí tó lóyìnbó ń pè ní coordinator Yorùbá Nation Youth website. Láìpẹ́ láì jìnnà la bẹ̀rẹ̀ ètò ìdánilẹ́kọ̀ọ́ nípa bá a ṣe ń ṣe àti bá a ṣe ń lo drone. Ó ń tàwọn ọ̀kan òjọ̀kan ètò empowerment gbogbo tá a ti là kalẹ̀ bí ètò iṣẹ́ àgbẹ̀ ìrànwọ́ fún àwọn ọmọléèwé tó kù díẹ̀ fún káàtó ètò ìkọ́sẹ́ ọ̀fẹ́ tó ń tirisẹ́ ìgbàlódé táwọn fi ṣiṣẹ́ lọ́fẹ̀ẹ́ ti ká ran àwọn ọmọ tó bá lẹ́bùn tá a mọ̀ sí talent lọ́wọ́ gbogbo ẹ̀ fún ìrọ̀rùn àwa ara wa láti darapọ̀ mọ́ Yorùbá Nation Youth tàbí tẹ́ bá fẹ́ jẹ́ coordinators nílùú tẹ́ bá wà bíi Europe, Asia, Canada, America, Australia. Bó sì ṣẹgbẹ́ yín nìkan tẹ́ bá fẹ́ fi ràn wá lọ́wọ́ bí ilẹ̀ tá a fi ń dákọ nílé ọ́fíìsì nílùú tẹ́ bá wà owó àti bẹ́ẹ̀ bẹ́ẹ̀ lọ ẹ kàn sí wọn látòrí www.yorubanationyouthwebsite.org. Bákan náà ní ẹ lè pè tàbí kẹ́ WhatsApp Homeland Coordinator lórí +234-717-3355 tàbí kẹ́pẹ́ Prophet Ayọ̀délé Ológunlolúwa tí wọ́n jẹ́ Yorùbá Nation Youth Leader in all diaspora lórí +1-803-846-1146. Pẹ̀lú Yorùbá Nation Youth website yìí ìrọ̀rùn ti dé.
ẹ káàbọ̀ sà sí dáadáa lẹ dé gbogbo ará òkè ọ̀hún kọ́.
àbúrò dáadáa ni o ẹ̀yin náà ń kọ́ tí mo bá yín dáadáa.
sẹ́ẹ̀rì ẹ̀gbọ́n ó tiẹ̀ dá eléyìí tẹ́ ẹ wá yìí tẹ́ ẹ bá ti ń lọ. ẹ káàbọ̀ sà sí dáadáa lẹ dé gbogbo ará òkè ọ̀hún kọ́.
àbúrò dáadáa ni o ẹ̀yin náà ń kọ́ tí mo bá yín dáadáa.
A kí yín, mo kí ọmọdé, mo kí àgbàlagbà, mo kí ọkùnrin, bẹ́ẹ̀ ni mo kí obìnrin lónìí. Mo kí onílé, bẹ́ẹ̀ ni mo kí àlejò wa pátápátá wípé kí Olódùmarè ọba tó ṣẹ̀dá wa kó máa bẹ pẹ̀lú èmi àti yín lónìí. Yorùbá wọn ní ìran àgbẹ̀ báyìí ni wọ́n ní àró, ìran àlùkò ni wọ́n lò sùn. Ìran lékelèké àwọn a máa ní ẹ̀fun. Mo kí ọmọdé, mo kí àgbàlagbà lónìí lórí ètò wa. Orúkọ tí mi yí padà, Omoboriowo ayé kò tọ́, òun náà ni èmi ń jẹ́. Wọ́n bá yẹ pé àkọ́rẹ́ tí ó ń wo ètò wa ní bá ṣe ń ṣe lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ báyìí máa rọ̀ yín pé kí ẹ bá wa subscribe sórí YouTube channel wa bẹ́ẹ̀ gbogbo ẹ̀yin tí ẹ wà ní orí TikTok pẹ̀lú wa ẹ̀yin náà darapọ̀ mọ́ wa ní orí YouTube wa náà pàápàá bí a ṣe ń ṣe ètò yìí bá ṣe ń ṣe lọ́wọ́lọ́wọ́ báyìí àtẹ̀yin tí ẹ ń wò wá ní orí Facebook náà bákan náà ẹ̀yin tí wọ́n wà lórí Twitter bákan náà àtẹ̀yin tí ẹ ń wò wá lórí Instagram a kí wa pé ẹ káàbọ̀ sórí ètò wa lónìí mo kí gbogbo mùsùlùmí pé assalamu alaikum wa rahmatulahi ta'ala wa barakatuh bẹ́ẹ̀ ni mo kí gbogbo ẹ̀yin kìrìsìtẹ́nì pátápátá wípé kí àṣẹ àti ọ̀rọ̀ Olódùmarè kí ó máa bẹ pẹ̀lú gbogbo wa bẹ́ẹ̀ sì ni mo kí gbogbo ẹ̀yin tí ẹ jẹ́ ẹlẹ́sìn kan àbáláyé wípé ògbó atọ́ àsúre ìwòrìwò fún kí àlàáfíà àti oore ọ̀fẹ́ Elédùmarè kó máa bá gbogbo ẹ̀yin tó jẹ́ pé kò ṣẹbọ kò ṣe mùsùlùmí kò ṣe kìrìsìtẹ́nì kò gbàgbọ́ nù kankan wípé ó gbàgbọ́ wípé ọba kan ń bẹ tí ń jẹ́ Ọlọ́run ó dẹ̀ gbàgbọ́ wípé bọ́lọ́run ọba ṣe wà yìí ọba tó jẹ́ pé òun ní gbàgbọ́ nínú ẹni ẹ má bínú àwọn tó wà ní ó gbàgbọ́ pé ọba kan tí ń jẹ́ Ọlọ́run òun náà nìkan ni ọba kí ohun tó náà tó gbàgbọ́ nínú ẹ̀ kó máa mú láradá wà pé Elédùmarè yóò máa bẹ pẹ̀lú wa lónìí láṣẹ Ọlọ́run ẹ̀yin wa lórí ètò wa tí a mọ̀ sí ìmọ̀ràn àgbà pẹ̀lú bàbá wa Dr. Báṣẹ̀gùn Chief OLUSOLA òní òun náà ni a tún mú wá fún wa ní òní gẹ́gẹ́ bí a ṣe mọ̀ wípé ètò yìí yóò máa wáyé ní ẹ̀ẹ̀mejì lọ́sẹ̀ abala ẹ̀ òun náà tún ni eléyìí tí a ó tún máa ṣe lónìí lágbára Ọlọ́run kí sì ni tí ètò tòní kí ni tó dálé lórí kí ni tí a fẹ́ sọ̀rọ̀ nípa ẹ̀ lónìí ohun tí èmi àti ẹ tí a gbọ́dọ̀ fi ara balẹ̀ kí a gbọ́ bí iṣu ṣe kú bí ọ̀bẹ bó ṣe bẹ̀ torí pé ìmọ̀ràn àgbà a máa ṣe ni ní kàyéfì lọ́pọ̀lọpọ̀ torí pé ohun tí àgbàlagbà tí ó bá rí lórí ìjókòó tí ọmọdé bá nàgà ó ṣeé ṣe kí ó má lè rí ìbéèrè sì wà fún gbẹ̀yìn tí ẹ ń wò wá káàkiri láti béèrè lọ́wọ́ bàbá wa OLUSOLA òní tẹ́ bá ní ìbéèrè kan tí ẹ fẹ́ bi wọ́n léèrè bí ètò yìí bí ó bá ṣe ń lọ lọ́wọ́ ètò wa tòní tí a mọ̀ sí ìmọ̀ràn àgbà ohun tí yóò máa tẹ̀lé pé why did Yoruba come to be Nigerian? How did Yoruba come to be Nigerian? Kí ni ìdí tí ìran Yorùbá ṣe padà wá jẹ́ ara orílẹ̀-èdè Nàìjíríà? Ẹ rí i pé ní last program wa tá a ṣe bí ọjọ́ mẹ́ta sẹ́yìn, a sọ the reason why Oluga merged the South Protectorate and North Protectorate together, because they did it because in order to reduce the burden on them because of the northern side, because they get nothing from the north, and then the only way they can substitute north is to use South Protectorate to substitute the burden on the north. That's exactly why the 1914 amalgamation was fully fraud. Then today we are going to discuss on how did Yoruba come to be Nigeria. Bàbá wa Olúṣọlá òní mo fẹ́ kẹ́ bá mi kí àwọn èèyàn wa tán wà lé ẹ káàbọ̀ sórí ètò wa sà ẹ bá mi kí àwọn èèyàn tán wà lé sà.
Ẹ káalẹ́ o, níbikíbi tẹ́ ẹ bá wà. Welcome to the program yet again. I hope that you have enjoyed what we have been able to discuss with you.
Thank you, sir.
We try to be as fundamental as we can be, because I think until you know the fundamentals, you really don't know what the solutions should be.
Yes.
So what we try to do is to go to the fundamentals. I hope you have enjoyed the 3 programs we have done so far. There are hopefully, like along, many more programs to come.
Of course.
And if you have any ideas about what you want me to talk about, let me know through our host, Mr. Omoboriowo, so that we can talk about as many things as you wish to talk about. Thank you very much for tuning in, because without you, the effort that one makes in preparing to talk to you would be in vain. I can assure you, I don't just come here and just talk. I do prepare very diligently when I come to talk to you. And today, one of the things that has been bothering me for a while is the question that most of us don't really pay any attention to. Most people think that we became Nigerians in 1914. So it's nice to know how we became Nigerians. How we became, and this is very important, because we Yoruba, we are daily humiliated in Nigeria. Every day we are humiliated. The Fulani, they treat us with contempt, and they say it's in the name of Nigeria. Even our own politicians treat us with disdain. All in the name of Nigeria. But to my knowledge, we have no reason to be so humiliated. I mean, what they say is that, well, what we are going through is the price to pay for being Nigerians. So I'm asking the question: when did we Yoruba ever agree to be Nigerians? Because this is very important that we know exactly. Because we've never had a plebiscite, we've never had a referendum. And also, before Nigeria came into existence, we Yoruba, we had an established political order. We had a self-government. We have autonomy. And we base our self-government on what you can call city-states, ILU. That's how our governments were organized. So each city-state, each independent city-state had its own ruler. That's the Oba. And it also has its own lawmaking council. That's how every town, every city, every village was organized exactly the same way. There's a ruler and there's a council that makes the laws. That's how it was. where the Yoruba is different from most setup that you can think of is that all these city-states, you know, whether Ijebu Ode, Ibadan, Abeokuta, all this came together as what we would call a confederate to form the Yoruba country. So all these little city-states all together were like a confederacy. And they form what the Yorubas used to call Orile-Ede Yoruba. That is the Yoruba country. And the reason was that we Yoruba were united by a common descent. We believe that we have one progenitor. We speak the same language. We have the same culture and tradition. We have the same religion before the Europeans came. We have the same way of life. And the Yoruba country is a definite territory. It's not something that you know you dream. It's a definite territory which was owned and exclusively governed by the Yoruba people. Indeed, Britain recognized the Yoruba land as a country. On the 23rd of July, 1888, Britain signed a treaty of friendship and trade with the Yoruba land, in which it was expressly stated that the Yoruba were not giving up an inch of their land to anybody. That treaty, in my view, is still in force today. And in my view, it is a treaty that we must revive. We Yoruba must demand the revival of that treaty, the 1888 Britain-Yoruba Land Treaty. Now, in 1899, Britain did not own the Yoruba country. Yet, the Queen of Britain passed a law in her own country in which she joined, or we call it amalgamation, in which she joined the Yoruba land with strangers to form Nigeria. Britain did not consult the Yoruba people or ask for their consent. Britain created Nigeria because it had the military might to do so. Agbára tí wọ́n ní náà fi create Nigeria. And Britain governed the Yoruba country through Nigeria until 1960. So that between 1914 amalgamation and 1960, when we had independence, Britain did not at any time ask the Yoruba people in a plebiscite or referendum or whatever that, do you wish to be Nigerians? We were never asked. The British never asked. The reason may be because between 1914 and 1960, Nigeria did not really exist. Nigeria was not a sovereign state. And there were therefore no Nigerians, only British subjects. So between amalgamation and independence, Nigeria was not a sovereign state. Nigeria was a colony of Britain, and therefore there were no Nigerians, if you see what I mean. So when did the idea of the Yoruba being Yoruba Nigerians, when did it start? It started with a British Legislative Act. The Yoruba became Nigerians by choice for the first time on 1 October 1960. Remember what I said earlier, that until 1960, Nigeria was not a state. Nigeria was just a colony, part of Great Britain's empire, if you like. So there were nobody was a Nigerian. Everybody was British subject. But in October in 1960, the British Parliament passed a law granting independence to Nigeria. And this is important because although the Constitution was a British legislative act, the British, they were the ones who wrote the Constitution. But the Constitution was negotiated by 3 separate groups of Nigerians. They called it Nigerian protectorates in those days. And these are Eastern Nigeria, Northern Nigeria, Western Nigeria. Western Nigeria is the only one that was mono-ethnic. That was Yoruba land. So those three were the ones that came together, agreed to form Nigeria. So Nigeria did not exist until then, until this group of three people, Eastern Nigeria, Northern Nigeria, and Western Nigeria, when they came together to form Nigeria. It was then, for the first time, that we became Nigerians. And the fact of the matter was that we consented at that time. We made a choice to be Nigerian. And this therefore is in the nature of a contract, because it was an agreement between us and the British. I don't know if you know anything about contract law. In contract, there are three elements. Someone makes an offer, somebody accepts the offer, and then there's consideration, there's an exchange. For our independence, the offer was made by Britain. Acceptance was by the three protectorates, that is, the three groups that I mentioned earlier, and I will keep repeating this over and over. Eastern Nigeria, Northern Nigeria, Western Nigeria. They were the ones that accepted the offer of independence. And the consideration was a mutual consideration, was independence for Nigeria. And the part that tells you that this was a contract is in Section 1 of the 1960 Constitution. It says this constitution shall be the force of law, which means it was legally binding not only on Eastern Nigeria, Northern Nigeria, and Yoruba land, it was also binding on Britain. Interestingly, the Constitution included the right to terminate. That is, if any of those three groups that formed this Nigeria wanted to leave, Section 4.1 says this: Parliament may alter any of the provisions of this Constitution. In other words, the Parliament could have dissolved Nigeria. Only Parliament had the legal right to terminate the 1960 Independence Constitution. And the important thing about that Constitution is this: it assigned sovereignty 4 ways. There were 4 ways, 4 sovereignties in Nigeria at that time. The first one was the British Crown. The second one was Eastern Nigeria. The third one was Northern Nigeria. And the fourth one was Western Nigeria. Each one of the 3 regions of Nigeria at that time had its own separate constitution, which reinforced this thing I'm talking about, that each one of them was a sovereign nation. Eastern Nigeria had its own constitution. Northern Nigeria had its own constitution. Yoruba land had its own constitution, because they were all separate. So it was by accepting the 1960 Independence Constitution that we Yoruba agreed to be Nigerians. Before then, we weren't Nigerians. But when we agreed in 1960 to the Independence Constitution, we became Nigerians. But the interesting thing is this: I've been talking about sovereignty. The importance of it is this, that technically, the Yoruba had dual citizens. That is, they were citizens of both Yoruba land, that is Western region. They were citizens of the Western region. They were also citizens of Nigeria, because the sovereignty of Western region was one, the sovereignty of the federal government was the other. So that's how, for the first time, we Yoruba became Nigerians. We became Nigeria by choice again for the second time in 1963. when the Nigerian parliament passed a law establishing Nigeria as a republic. What happened was that in May 1963, the Prime Minister, the premiers of Eastern region, Western region, and Northern region, they met. They had a meeting and they discussed what are the constitutional issues. They were reviewing constitutional issues at that time. They then set up an all-party constitutional conference. And this conference met in Lagos in July 1963. The conference recommended Nigeria became a republic. The recommendation went to Parliament. Parliament accepted the recommendation, and Parliament made a new constitution. That new constitution, that 1963 Republic Constitution, was also a contract. And the parties were this. There was the federal government, which has its own constitution. There was Western region with its own constitution, Eastern region with its own constitution, and Northern region with its own constitution. So again, if we look at the elements of the contract, the four heads of government, that is federal and regions, they made an offer to the parliament. The parliament accepted it and made a law creating the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In other words, by accepting that Republican Constitution, the Yoruba people, we Yoruba people again agreed to be citizens of Nigeria. But again, because our sovereignty was still there, we had dual citizenship. We were citizens of Western region, Yoruba land, and citizens of Nigeria. And again, like before, the 1963 Constitution superseded the 1960s Constitution. It was a legislative act. The Parliament debated it and it decided that this was the Constitution we were going to have. Just like before, Section 1 of the Constitution says this Constitution shall have the force of law, meaning that it was legally binding on the federal government and each of the three regional governments. So the parties to the contract were again the four sovereignties. The federal government, which by now had replaced the Queen of England, or the British Queen, if you like, Western Nigeria, Eastern Nigeria, and Northern Nigeria. Those are the four sovereigns, the four groups that agreed the 1963 Constitution. And you will begin to understand why I'm emphasizing this all the time, that the Constitution of 1963, like the Constitution of 1960, was by agreement between four groups: the federal government, the Western government, the Northern government, and the Eastern government. And as before, the Constitution included the right to terminate the agreement, which was in Section 4.1. And it says the same as before, that Parliament may alter any of the provisions of this Constitution. It says Parliament. It doesn't say anybody can come from outside and alter it. That in order to alter the Constitution of Nigeria, only the Parliament could do it. Western Nigeria, that is Yoruba land, again had its own separate constitution. This time, what is important about that constitution this time was that it was enacted by the regional legislation in Ibadan. It was in Ibadan that they made the constitution of Yoruba land. And at the beginning, they stated that this was a self-governing region of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Let that sink in. When the legislatures of Western region wrote the Western region constitution by themselves, they wrote it themselves, they indicated that the Yoruba land, the Western region, was a self-governing region of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And what is important about that constitution is Section 89.7. This is which tells you that the Yoruba land was a separate sovereignty. And this is what that section says. It says, for the avoidance of doubt, it is hereby declared that any power to make laws conferred by this constitution Constitution includes power to make laws having extraterritorial operation. I don't know if you understand that. What they are saying is that the laws of Western region can include external affairs. And in fact, the Nigeria embassy today was bought by Western region. Nigeria didn't buy it. It was owned by Western region. Once everybody else, they were doing their year all over the place, Awolowo and co, they established a proper embassy round the corner from Downing Street, round the corner from Parliament. That's to tell you, as a sovereign nation within Nigeria, Western region was going places. So if I summarize what I've just said, in 1960, for our independence, we Yorubas, we made a choice to be Nigerians. In 1963, when we decided to be a republic, we Yoruba people decided that we were going to be Nigerians. But under certain conditions. Number one, the Constitution was an agreement between 3 sovereign nations. So this was not a constitution that was imposed by anybody or written in one corner. It was agreed. So each region had its own constitution. Northern region had its own constitution. Eastern region had its own constitution. Western region had its own constitution. On top of that was then the federal constitution. Because the power that the federal government had was ceded to federal government by the regions. That's why it was called a federation. That's why they called it federation. Because the power that the center had was ceded to it by the regions. Everything changed in 1966. If I go back again, remember the first time that the Yoruba agreed to be Nigerians, it was a legislative act by the British Parliament. A legislative act. The second time, it was a legislative act by Nigerian Parliament. Then we come to 1966. Everything changed. Now, to be citizens of Nigeria was now, to be a Nigerian was now imposed on you by the military. These soldiers, they carried out treason. Treason. They murdered in cold blood, if you remember, the head of the federal government, Tafawa Balewa, the head of the Western region, Ladoke Akintola, the head of the Northern region, Ahmadu Bello. So 3 of the 4 sovereigns, Nigerian soldiers, killed the heads. I mean, I'm not going to go into why the fourth one survived. I mean, that's another story entirely. But what I'm trying to get you to understand is that Nigeria was composed of 4 sovereignties. In 1966, they killed the head of 3 of the sovereignties. And after that, the Nigerian military, in their arrogance, drunk with power, they unilaterally created a new Nigeria. Remember the Nigeria we are talking about before the independence or the Republic? Western region, Eastern region, Northern region, they came together. They agreed that we are going to have Nigeria, so they get independence. They come together again, we are going to have a republic, so they get a republic. This time, from 1966 The soldiers, as I said, drunk with power, so full of themselves, they unilaterally created a new Nigeria, to which nobody, so this is the third version of Nigeria, to which nobody agreed. Not one person agreed. So they then make things worse. Instead of 4 sovereignties that we had before, they decided that there was only going to be one. Do you understand? Do you understand where I'm coming from? 4 sovereignties. That's what we had before, for independence, for republic. But the army decided that they were now going to have their own Nigeria. They decided that they were going to now have their own Nigeria. So they dispensed of Western region, they dispensed of Eastern region, they dispensed of Northern region. Without debate, without consultation with anybody, they decided that this is what they were going to do. So the sovereignties that were agreed for independence in 1960, that were agreed for republic in 1963, these people just dispensed of it. And then to make things worse, in May 1999, the Fulani militarists, they decided that they were going to impose their own feudal constitution on Nigeria. Their own feudalistic constitution. They decided that they were going to impose it on Nigeria. They did not consult with Yoruba people. They didn't consult with us whether we were going to be part of their Nigeria. We didn't have any contract with the soldiers who are making all these decisions. We have not agreed to any of this Nigeria. So the third Nigeria, the Nigeria of today, which started in 1966, we have never agreed to it. And what I say about this, the acronym that I use for this is that today we Yoruba are Nigerians in fear only. We are not Nigerians by choice. So before we had Nigeria by choice. I'm sorry that I keep repeating myself, but I think this is very important that we understand this. How we Yoruba came to be Nigerians. 1960, for independence, we agreed with Northern Nigeria and Eastern Nigeria that we were going to become Nigerians. So we became Nigerians. 1963, again, we agreed with Northern Nigeria, Eastern Nigeria, to form a republic of which we will be Nigerians. Then in 1966 came the army, the soldiers. They decided that they didn't like the Nigeria that we agreed to create. They decided that they were now going to create their own Nigeria. They created their own Nigeria. They didn't ask anybody. They just decided they didn't like the old Nigeria. They must now create a third Nigeria in which the constitution is almost like a feudal system. Almost like a feudal system. So that instead of a collegiate, which is what we had before, a collegiate, we just had one man who decided everything. We have legislatures that can steal your money as much as they like. They created chaos, and Nigeria has been in chaos ever since. Now, don't think that the Yorubas are the only one that don't like what happened. Don't think that I'm the only one who is talking about sovereignty and nobody else. Remember this, the Eastern region rejected their loss of sovereignty. Let me say that again. The Eastern region, they rejected the loss of their sovereignty. And what did they do? In 1967, they fought the Biafra War for it. Biafra War didn't just happen. it was as a result of the fact that they lost the sovereignty that they had negotiated in 1960 and in 1963. That's how the Biafra War came about, and it lost up, and the eastern region lost up to 2 million lives because they wanted to regain their sovereignty. Okay, you think it's only the eastern region? No. The northern region too, they have rejected the loss of sovereignty. They are not happy that they have lost sovereignty. How do we know that? We know that because in 2000, they instituted in their 12 Arewa states the Sharia constitution. And they say to us, to the rest of Nigeria, that the Sharia constitution was superior to the Nigerian constitution. In other words, Nigeria that we are in now, that all these, I don't know what you will call our politicians, that they are so happy to govern, the actual signatories to Nigeria, they don't agree. There is no region in Nigeria that agrees with the way Nigeria is. I know if I go back to the beginning, I know everybody says, oh, well, Nigeria was created in 1914. Nigeria did not exist. There were no Nigerians. There were no Nigerians at all until the three regions agreed to have independence. Before then, Nigerians, what would be Nigerians were just British subjects. Nigeria was a colony. Nigeria was not a country. Nigeria was a colony, part of British Empire. So there were no Nigerians until the three groups, Eastern region, Northern region, Western region, until they came together, agreed. It doesn't matter what anybody might say about their motives or whatever. The fact is, they formed Nigeria by agreement. Nigeria came into existence by agreement on the 1st of October 1960. And when they then decided that they were going to go republic and no longer to be under British tutelage, again, the three regions agreed. The three regions agreed that we were going to have a republic. From 1966, there are no Nigerians since 1966, because the agreement that created the Republic of Nigeria is in abeyance. It's there in one corner. And until you revive that 1963 constitution, there's no Nigeria. I know that those who rule Nigeria do not believe in law. I mean, the soldiers have taught us to be lawless, and that's exactly what is happening. From 1966, Nigeria has been governed lawlessly, and that's why it's easy for them to steal the money, because there's no law. Nigeria has existed as a lawless jungle since 1966, because the agreement that people had to say, I'm a Nigerian because we had our own constitution that says so. Okay, I hope that I've explained to you how we Yorubas became Nigerians, and our period of being Nigerians lasted less than 6 years, actually. It started 1st October 1960, and it ended on the 15th of January 1966. And
Sir,
until
please, I want you to repeat that
the
statement,
regions
sir.
come together again to decide what is next, Nigeria does not exist.
Sir, you said
Thank you.
You said something now, please, which I want you to repeat, sir.
Oh, I said, oh, okay. What I was saying was that Nigeria existed from 1960 to less than 3 years, actually.
Less than 3 years.
Yes, Nigeria existed less than 3 years.
3 years.
Before these knuckleheads, these soldiers decided that they were going to ruin everything. Until the regions again come together, to say this is what we want, Nigeria does not exist.
Does not exist here.
I have actually, I did write to Tinubu when he became president to remind him that the constitution of the legal constitution of Nigeria is still the 1963 constitution. The 1999 constitution, or what I call the Fulani constitution, is not a constitution of Nigeria. That's what the Fulani decided that they were going to have. That's not a constitution of a country. It doesn't even matter if the military got together a group of people, or even the president today get together a group of people to decide that this was how they are going to do the next constitution. It can't be done. You have to go back to the regions. So you have to reconstitute Western region, Eastern region, Northern region. They then come together after they've been reconstituted, because they have they have their own constitution. You have to go back to 1963. And then the parliaments will now decide which direction to go.
All right, sir.
I hope that answers your question.
I have, thank you, sir. Bàbá wa tí wọ́n ti ń bá wa ṣọ́ra tára wọn náà ni Chief Bashegun Dr. Olusola ONI. Àwọn ni wọ́n ti bọ́ wá yànnàná àkọlé ètò ní lórí ìmọ̀ràn àgbà. Òun náà ni wípé how did Yoruba become Nigerian? Bàbá dẹ̀ sọ wípé Nàìjíríà fúngbà díẹ̀. Àmọ́ mo ní question méjì tí mo fẹ́ bèèrè lọ́wọ́ yín bí, because to me, I think even though Nigeria, or let me say Europe, Nigeria is not exist, even though the 1960 after the independence. The reason why I said is that is underlying questions here, because we got an independent in 1960. It's October 1st, 1960. But October 12th, 1960, something terrible happened. A revised statement was made by Ahmadu Bello.
Yes, I know.
Then I will quote, for those who are watching us, please, you can just go and search for the Pirate newspaper, October 12, 1960. Then I will quote, Ahmadu Bello. He said, let me just start from the beginning. They said the Pirate newspaper of October 12, 1960, quote, Ahmadu Bello, Sultana of Sokoto, leader of Northern People Congress, which is NPC. He said, in the prime of the Northern region, as arriving tours, there he said, a new nation called Nigerian should be an estate of our great-grandfather, Usman Dan Fodio. Now, I will just pause on this. We have an independent in 1960, which everybody, October 4th, 1960. Then, to me, the independence of Nigeria become Nigeria ended October 12th, because that is when the Orified statement was made. That said, we are not compatible, we are not in the same mindset, we are not going in the same line, we don't have the same culture, the same region, the same food, we are not coming from the same place. Then let me just continue. Said, the new nation called Nigeria, because it's a new nation, just 12 days old baby. The new nation called Nigerian shall be an estate of our great-grandfather, Usman Dan Fodio. Then he said, we must ruthlessly prevent the change of power. What Fulani is doing today, they know that they will do it, they plan it from the beginning of the death of Nigeria.
Okay.
He said, we must ruthlessly, let me just read, then I will allow you to say your own person. He said, we must ruthlessly prevent the change of power. We must use minority in the north as willing tools and the south as a conquered territory, and never allow them to rule over us. I think if he stopped here, I will not doubt, I will not even think it twice, but the last sentence pissed me off by saying, and never allow them to have control over their future. What is happening to our children today? What is happening to our youth today? They don't have the control over their future. Never allow them to have the control over their future. Is it not a modern slavery in our own father's land, in our own mother's land? Why we keep silent? Why the elders of that day, why did those who lead Yoruba on that day keep silent on this horrified statement?
Yes, okay. Let me just take a step back and talk about the Yoruba politicians of the day. That's why I read to you the Constitution of 1963, where they said the Constitution was written by us as a self-governing part of Nigeria.
Yeah.
All right? And they also said that any laws that we make has external operation. That is, the Sadano could say whatever he liked. The Western region was its own master. Nobody could interfere with what we were doing. What gave the Sadano, I don't, sometimes I don't like talking about our relationship with the Igbos.
It's not done. Okay.
With the Igbos. Sometimes I don't, because if you go that way, you never forgive them.
The Igbo?
Yes. If you start looking at what they have done.
What it did.
Yes. Because they gave the Sardauna the power to say what he said.
Oh my God.
After the election of 1959, there were no winners. Nobody had the majority. To any right-thinking human being, Nkrumah, who was Azikiwe's friend, was surprised that Azikiwe went to go and make a coalition with Northerners and left the progressive West.
He thought he would rule them. He thought he can control them.
No. In what way? He was just Governor General. He accepted a figurehead position. That's what he did. And Zik owed the Yoruba a lot because Macaulay founded the NCNC. It wasn't founded by Azikiwe. Macaulay, a Yoruba, founded the NCNC. But because of I think the problem was that Zik was afraid of competition, of intellectual competition.
Yeah, and he thought he can use not to conquer the South.
But that's what he did.
But now they conquered their own territory also too.
Because he was stupid. Because he was blind. He didn't think. When he was conniving with them to send Awolowo to prison, what did he expect that he would gain if Awolowo went to prison?
He thought they are not wise. They thought they are not even having knowledge.
I mean, he was the fool. Azikiwe was the fool. When they decided that they were going to take the Midwest region, was not economically viable, but they engineered the creation of Midwest from Western region. Meanwhile, in Eastern region there are minorities.
Yes,
they didn't create a region for them. In the
north, he was greedy because he still planned to rule the Southern Protectorate at that particular time also too.
But he didn't.
When it was completed with Awolowo.
Yeah, but the problem was that he was not intellectually capable like Awolowo was.
Of course.
He didn't have a vision. I keep saying this when people talk about leadership. Leadership involves vision that you can see more than your followers can see. You can see where you're going. What vision did Zeke have? He wants to be Pan-African.
Pan-African. I see.
When people say charity begins at home. If you don't sort your own home, you don't sort your own house out, you want to be Pan-Africanist. Delusions. Zeke was a deluded man. He had a delusion of grandeur. He was deluded. And he couldn't see the big picture. That if the West and the East are teamed together, Nigeria will have been a completely different place.
Now.
Yes. Instead, you hand over the country to the people with the lowest number of educated people.
And then the
lowest number of everything. So you go and make an ex-teacher the prime minister of your country, no matter how nice it might be. And they didn't. He just couldn't. And that is why Sardauna could make the statement that he made. And the thing is that there's another clip that you probably haven't seen before. I don't know whether you've seen it. When Sardauna was interviewed by the BBC, I think, and he said plainly that they would rather have expatriates come to northern Nigeria than the Igbos.
Yeah, I think I heard it. I think I watched that clip when the guy was asking the relationship between him and the Igbo. And they said whenever the Igbo go, they want to dominate the place and become the owner of the place, and that is why we cannot allow them in the north. I think I have watched that clip once.
And so it's about the same time, about October the 12th. So you have a situation where your coalition partner, the Northerners who are your coalition partners, they don't want you in the north. They don't want you in the north. And still, you want to have coalition with them. That's the beginning of the corruption of Nigeria. So the Ahmadu Bello could say what he said because he had Azikwe behind him. Remember, at that time, most of national politics were Igbos. Most of the military hierarchy, everything. They were in all these really high positions in Nigeria. And they destroyed everything by the stupidity of deciding to share quality. I mean, you're sharing quality. Even in the north, there was no election. They had election in the east, in the west. They didn't have it in the north in 1959 because they wouldn't allow women to vote. So they used a system of electoral college.
At all.
And yet you, as an, I don't know, you have PhD or whatever it is, somebody who's supposed to be intellectual, to be bright, you want to be ineffective in a country that you fought for independence. You decided that you are going to be ineffective, that you are going to be ceremonial. They are going to be like the Queen of England. Anyway, as I said, I don't. When it comes
all
to
right, it's okay. Let me just quickly go to the last question for today's episode. Also, the question is: we talk about Yorubas generally, because when we talk about Yoruba, we talk about the culture, we talk about our heritage, we talk about everything concerning Yorubas, and then I think this question, even though concerning the religion. This part, maybe we may not be able to finish this part today because I said our last episode, There is a statement made also in February 2nd, 1835 by Lord Macaulay. Then I will read it again. It's about Yoruba also, because we are discussed about Yoruba and everything is about Yoruba. Let me just go straight to the statement which Lord Macaulay was sent to British Parliament in February 2nd, 1835, because all that the was listed here was happened to Yoruba today. We lost our culture, we lost everything, we lost moral, we lost our food, we lost our ancient traditional religion, we lost everything so far. And whenever that I read this statement, I feel so sad that this is where we find ourselves at the end of the day. The statement said that it said, Lord Macaulay said to the British Parliament that I have traveled across the length and breadth of Africa. I have not seen any one person who is a beggar, who is a thief. Such words I have seen in this country, such high morals, people of such caliber. People of such caliber, this country. I don't think we will ever conquer this country unless we break the very backbone of this nation, which is our spiritual and cultural heritage. And therefore, I propose that we replace our old and ancient educational system, our culture, only of if the African think that all that is foreign and English is good and greater than their own, they will lose their self-esteem, their nature, their culture, and they will become what we want them to be, a true dominated nation. Now, sir, my question to God is, as a Yoruba, do we still have the culture? Do we still have the ancient religion? Do we still have ancient educational system in those days? Do we still have that high morale that we have as back of 1835? Do we still have it now?
Okay. I don't want to disillusion you. But the first thing I will tell you is that that quote by Lord Macaulay,
yes,
I'm not quite sure how authentic it is. I have quoted it in articles myself.
Yeah, but it's everywhere online on the internet.
I tell you why. I tell you why.
Unless if you can see the authentic.
The same statement was credited to him in India. And there, instead of Africa, he put India. So whenever you see Africa in that statement, it has India in it. Because I have quoted exactly the same thing, but I have seen in fact, I think either the ex-prime minister of Pakistan or the prime minister of India quoted that statement. That's how
because the guy traveled across because to me, sir,
he quoted it within where Africa is in what you have read.
Yes,
they put India.
Yes, sir. Because when I was given the topic on this particular statement, I believe this is what we call the feasibility study, because we need to know the root cause of the problems. They came to have their own feasibility study on African before.
No, I will come back to that. But
let me just allow you, sir. You are the speaker of today, because I will
come back to that. No, I think it is important that when because I've searched Hansard,
all right,
I've looked for everywhere for this statement. It's possible that it's hidden, that it's been erased or whatever. I don't know. But when you try and search for it, you can't find it.
Wow.
And it's the same picture. I have the picture on my computer. I look at it from time to time. Exactly the same picture. It's also with the lines, lines that somebody scribbled on it. It's exactly the same as the one in India.
Indian. Wow.
Which tells me that there's something funny about it.
Funny, maybe.
But to come back to something more serious.
All right, sir.
There is something that I call the Nigerian disease. And that Nigerian disease is a disease that tells those in power that they are entitled to do whatever they like. And because those in power do whatever they like, everything goes down and down and down and down until it reaches the bottom. So we are all doing exactly the same. So that if you are driving along and somebody drives in the opposite direction, he doesn't think he has done anything wrong. In fact, other people will be telling you, he's breaking the law. This is the Nigerian disease. That anything, remember I was telling you about the chaos once the military destroyed Nigeria, once they bastardized everything, the chaos. Nigeria is in a chaotic state. Everything has been completely destroyed. I think I was somewhere I was talking about I wrote an article about the architecture, the Yoruba architecture, the way we used to build houses. And my family home in Kudeti in Ibadan still has that architecture. You look at it everywhere, you don't find that architecture anymore. Everybody is building like English or Brazilian houses. Not like the Yorubas used to build it, so that because it's so communal, old people will be looked after, young people will be looked after. Nobody is alone. When we come to whether it is marriage or burial or whatever, everything has changed because of Nigeria, because of the disease of Nigeria. And in my view, until we go back to what we were before and we leave Nigeria completely, we will never ever go back to the way we were. We have to leave Nigeria in order for us to do things the Yoruba way. All is not lost. Everything is not lost. I mean, the interesting thing about us Yoruba is how do you say it? How it has been impossible to destroy the Yoruba culture. Totally impossible. That's why if you go to Brazil, you see Nigerian culture. You go to Cuba, you see Yoruba culture. You go to Cuba, you see Yoruba culture. You go to the West Indies, you see Yoruba culture. Because Yoruba culture is a fundamental civilization that is indestructible. Sometimes, I mean, during this series, I may have take time to talk about the Yoruba civilization, how it is as ancient as the Chinese civilization or the Indian civilization. And it is because of the fundamental nature of our civilization. That's why it is indestructible. That's why it's everywhere. Our music, even today, our music is everywhere. Because we have this fundamental civilization that is almost indestructible. So forget the quote that is credited to Lord Macaulay. Let us remember that it is Nigeria that has bastardized Yoruba land. And until we get out of Nigeria, we are in trouble. Any more questions?
until we get out of Nigeria. Yes, you are right, sir. I think for now I have no question anymore. Thank you so much
Okay.
for your contribution today.
I think we need to be optimistic when we finish to say that we will get out of Nigeria.
We will.
I'm certain of it, and it will happen in my lifetime.
Amen.
We will get out of Nigeria. We will get out of Nigeria. Nigeria is going to break up. Sooner or later.
Láṣẹ Elédùmarè. Ẹ̀yin wa tí ẹ̀ ń wò wá lé bàbá wa Báṣẹ́gun sí Olúṣọlá òní àwọn ni wọ́n ń bẹ pẹ̀lú wa. Odùfá kan tí màá fi ṣàdúrà fún bàbá òun náà ni Ọ̀yẹ̀kú. Màá fi ṣàdúrà fún pé ẹ̀mí wọn ó gùn lágbára Ọlọ́run. A sì rí ògo ilẹ̀ Yorùbá, a sì rí gbà láṣẹ Elédùmarè ní agbára Ọlọ́run, nítorí pé 20 ọdún lónìí gbọ̀ngbọ̀n ní tòkè òkè gbọ̀ngbọ̀n bàbá. 20 ọdún lónìí bàbá, gbọ̀ngbọ̀n ní tòkè òkè gbọ̀ngbọ̀n. 20 ọdún lónìí bàbá, gbọ̀ngbọ̀n ní tòkè òkè gbọ̀ngbọ̀n, torí pé ọlọ́mọ wáyé ikú òun náà là á gbókè. Láṣẹ Elédùmarè bàbá, àmọ̀rí bá kókó báyìí lárọ̀ talẹ̀ ní agbára Ọlọ́run, ara yóò mọ̀lẹ́, a sì mọ̀rí bá àwọn àgbà tí wọ́n sọ fún wa wípé láṣẹ Elédùmarè ilẹ̀ Yorùbá yóò wá sí ìmúṣẹ ní agbára àárín ilẹ̀ Yorùbá gbà lágbára Ọlọ́run, a sì pín. Ẹ̀yin wa ẹ ní àǹfààní àti darapọ̀ mẹ́tò yẹn, mo sọ pé tẹ́ ẹ bá ní ìbéèrè tàbí tẹ́ ẹ bá ní tẹ́ ẹ fẹ́ ká sọ nípa ẹ̀, tẹ́ ẹ bá ní tẹ́ ẹ fẹ́ mọ̀ nípa ìtàn Yorùbá, nípa ìtàn orílẹ̀ Nàìjíríà, tẹ́ ẹ fẹ́ kí bàbá kí wọ́n yànnàná nípa ẹ̀, ẹ dákun ẹ lè fi ìbéèrè yín tàbí ẹ fi ránṣẹ́. Ẹ lè fi ránṣẹ́ wa ní orí Gmail wa, which is omoboriowomedia1@gmail.com, tàbí kí ẹ fi ránṣẹ́ sí wa sí orí WhatsApp wa eléyìí tí ó wà ní description wa tí ẹ bá ní ohunkóhun tí ẹ fẹ́ bàbá léèrè. Lágbára Ọlọ́run láìpẹ́ láìjìnà bí ètò yìí bó bá ṣe ń tẹ̀síwájú, a máa ní àǹfààní àti máa gba ìpè nítorí pé a fẹ́ kí bàbá kí wọ́n àwọn tí wọ́n dẹ̀ ń sọ yìí náà a máa ṣe review ẹ̀ láwọn ọjọ́ kọ̀ọ̀kan bí a bá ṣe ń wá, torí pé a ti sọ̀rọ̀ nípa ẹ̀. Topic tá a tún ṣe lónìí pé why the Yorùbá become Nigeria. Tó bá tún di ìjọ Tuesday ẹ tún pàdé wa fún another episode míì, ìmọ̀ràn àgbà. Láṣẹ Elédùmarè gbogbo wa pátápátá a ò ní rí ogun àsáré bàbá. Mo kí yín pé 20 ọdún kan lágbára Ọlọ́run, a rí yín pẹ́, ẹ̀mí yóò gùn láṣẹ Elédùmarè. Níṣe ló san ọ̀sán tí ọmọ aráyé tí wọ́n fi máa ń nàgà lọ́ka, bó ti wulẹ̀ kí igbó kó dé gàgà tó, yóò san omi ara yín, yóò san ẹ̀jẹ̀ ara yín, yóò san ọmọ àtẹnubí, yóò san ọmọ àtàlọ́ ibi yín lágbára Ọlọ́run, yóò san ilé, yóò san ọ̀nà yín láṣẹ Olódùmarè ọba. Níṣe báyìí òun náà ló san oòrùn tí ọmọ aráyé ò fi taná kí wọ́n tó wọ ohunkóhun nínú ẹ̀. Bàbá yóò san yín ní agbára Elédùmarè ọba tó ṣẹ̀dá yín, agbára Ọlọ́run, títí di ìgbà míì tí a tún máa tí ẹ̀yin yẹn wá tí a tún máa pàdé bàbá ní orí ìkànnì ètò ìmọ̀ràn àgbà. Bàbá ò mọ̀ fi eléyìí ṣe lọ nígbà tí wọ́n yóò máa kí ẹ̀yin ọmọ ọ̀rẹ́ ẹbí àti ará àti ọ̀rẹ́ pípé ó dìgbà kan náà. A tún máa pàdé tó bá di ọjọ́ Tuesday ní agbára Olódùmarè. Ẹ bá mi kí àwọn aráalé bàbá ẹ dùgbèrè fún mi. Ẹ ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀ ó dàbọ̀. Yes sir. Ẹ̀yin wa tí a kí yín pé àjọ ṣètò lónìí nítorí pé oníyanṣẹ́ ọlọ́bẹ̀ ṣe ẹ̀yin tẹ́ bá wa jẹ́ náà ẹ kú àìbínú. Lágbára Olódùmarè ire àti àánú yóò máa tọ̀ èmi àti yín lẹ́yìn lọ́jọ́ ayé wa gbogbo. A ó sì máa kígbe Olúwa pé títí láéláé. Àmín. Lágbára Ọlọ́run àti gbogbo apápátá náà ládàgbà ẹ̀rí ìtàn àtohun tó yẹ kémi àti tó yẹ ká mọ̀, òun náà ni ètò yìí olùdalẹ̀ lórí ìmọ̀ràn àgbà pẹ̀lú bàbá wa Báṣẹ́gun Dr. Chief Olúṣọlá òní. Títí di ìgbà míì tí àkàntì ètò yìí yóò máa wáyé, orúkọ tèmi padà Omoboriowo ayé kò tọ́, òun náà ni èmi ń jẹ́. Ẹ̀yin wa tí ń wò wá fúngbà àkọ́kọ́, ẹ bá wa like ètò yìí, ẹ bá wa share ẹ̀. Bẹ́ẹ̀ sì ni àǹfààní wà fún yín láti fún wa ní star bí ètò yìí bó ṣe lọ lọ́wọ́ in the live program. Àǹfààní wà láti fún wa ní star, àǹfààní wà láti darapọ̀ mọ́ Omoboriowo family. Olódùmarè yóò sì ràn gbogbo wa lọ́wọ́. Mo kí gbogbo ẹ̀yin tí a jọ ṣètò lónìí wípé agara ò ní dá wa láṣẹ Olódùmarè gbogbo ọ̀ra pátápátá àní rí ogun àsáré pé a ò sí ní tójú oorun lójúkú títí dìgbà míì tí èmi àti yín yóò máa pàdé. Ó ó dàárọ̀ kí èmi àti yín kájọ fi ire kájọ fi pàdé ọ̀kọ̀ọ̀kan òun náà láàjì.
Lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Àsíá o, Yorùbá nation, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Àjò lè jò, onílé má relé, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Àjò lè dùn, kó dídẹrẹ́ má rèwọ́, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Ilé ẹni kì í bani lẹ́rù wò, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Ilé kókó máa ní tàgbé, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Ọmọ Yorùbá ilé ti yá náà, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Àgbájọwọ́ la máa fi sọ̀yà, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Ọmọ Yorùbá ilé ti yá náà, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Àsìkò ti tó Yorùbá kárẹ̀lé o, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́. Àsíá o, Yorùbá nation, lẹ́lẹ́ ni ó máa fẹ́.
Thank you for watching. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing so you won't miss out any of our latest video.